Coming up.
I see research grants given out to study Dolly Parton's lyrics. I go down the list and I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, here's one: understanding and addressing the mental health impacts of unpaid care workers on women in Bogota, Colombia.
One of the new research chairs was Jonathan Pruitt, the chair for biological dystopias, and he received a one-time federal grant of $350,000 for 7 years each. So that's a total of $2.4 million taxpayer dollars. What he did with that money is he wrote a bunch of papers using falsified data. Thanks to Retraction Watch, we know that he had the 15 papers retracted over 3 years.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
The committee resumes its study of the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada.
My question for you is, a lot of grant dollars that I've been able to look at, and I'm sure it's well into the millions, it has nothing to do with research in Canada. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be ignorant as a society and not look beyond our own borders, but should we be looking at more dollars invested in Canada and looking at a Canada first approach to our research? What do you think?
Sure, thanks for the question. It's a good question. I'll say first off that in terms of the dispersal of funds amongst the councils, just shy of 80% of all new funds that go into the councils go for health research, natural sciences, and engineering, so to NSERC and CIHR. So the vast majority go there, and I think lots of it may be partnered outside of here, but it isn't research on something specific to Canada or not specific to Canada. In terms of the value of research on issues around the globe, I think it's crucial for us to be studying things that happen in Canada, but also things that happen around the globe. My own personal background in graduate research was studying the Middle East and nuclear non-proliferation related to Israel and Iran. Now, am I bringing it to bear in the work I'm doing now for universities? I'm not sure, but I do think it's important for Canadians to be engaged in issues that are important around the world. I think that what's more interesting is actually a lot of the research that's taken place in recent years into things that are history here in Canada, and aspects of Indigenous cultures, of local regionist cultures, et cetera, that we may not have understood otherwise unless we were engaged in. No.
Your studies that you mentioned, that's very impressive. I would never question that, because that's a very interesting topic to study. But I see research grants given out to study Dolly Parton's lyrics. The committee's heard me go, Chad, I think he gets a sore stomach why I bring it up so much. Studying the Maiden Museum in Ukraine. The list goes on and on and on. And you'd think it might be a couple, but I would say it's hundreds. And it's in the millions of dollars. And I've just tried to test it out, and maybe I cherry pick it, but when when I'm around my riding on the weekend and people say, hey, what are you doing? I'll say, well, we're doing these studies and here's some things we're studying, and they can't believe that their taxpayer dollars are going to it. And I'm trying to present it in a fair manner. So some of the stuff you're mentioning, absolutely. It's great. People would be proud of this. But should we take a step back and look at some of these projects we're funding? Really?
Look, I think the peer review process, which I talked about, is about peers in a discipline judging what is a well-crafted research project according to the scientific method, right? You put forward a hypothesis and you're going to test it. They're going to say, is this the right experiment to run, whether that's in the social sciences or in the hard or medical sciences. I think that research reflects Canada as a whole. And as I said, the vast majority of it is in areas related to the harder sciences, medical research, et cetera. We do have research in fields in the social sciences that I know you can go through and question. I guess what I would say is we are a reflection of Canada as a whole. So just like there are arts and there are, nonprofit organizations, there are research in all those fields as well.
Fair enough. But I don't know how many times we've had people come here and say, Ben, you cannot challenge the people that make these decisions. Ben, it's unhealthy. It's not wise to go and look and cherry pick. We have to look at everything. But I go down the list and I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, here's one. And my optometrist said I need bifocals, and you know what? He's right, I do. I can't hardly read this. Understanding and addressing the mental health impacts of unpaid care workers on women in Bogota, Colombia. Now, if it was in Canada, I'd say great. But in Bogota, Colombia, why doesn't Bogota, Colombia pay for that study? And we'll do a study in Canada, maybe on unpaid work. What value is that to the Canadian taxpayer?
Sure. Look, I think that the value to the research enterprise is of the ability for researchers to explore any topic that they are interested in. I take it. I mean, look,
we're having a good conversation here, and honestly. I know you have to defend it. Ms. Johnson, does it frustrate you a little bit? And I don't want you and Dylan to get into a fight here, but does it frustrate you slightly when you're trying to get funding for your colleges and research money, and you know the studies, you're in the same groups as these guys. Does it not frustrate you that you can't get a little bit your way? Come on.
I think for me, the issue is that, as I tried to set out, the college approach to research in this country has, until now, not been valued in the way that we need to value it to drive impact for Canadians. And I think that, as I tried to set out, there's a need to look at the ecosystem that we invest in this country and start to look at, if we want to involve those that are partnering at the local level on problems that local folks have defined, we need to reinvest in college-led research as well.
Elon Musk's robot. That I saw him laying bricks and doing all this work. Wouldn't it be great to have one of those at every college in Canada and have young, brilliant minds think, how can we make this work for us? How can we... Absolutely. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great to apply for a project, a federal project, and do something like that?
Absolutely. I think our view is that there is an opportunity here to really be bold and rethink the opportunity to reinvest in college-led research in this country. Right now, we get 3% of the overall federal investments, and I've said to this committee before, I'd love to see it at 10%.
To what extent do you see EDI being considered, and do you have any comments in relation to it?
Listen, I think all of our institutions are committed to the principle of ensuring that all Canadians get a fair shake, both in terms of accessing a university education, should they wish to, which is still the most transformative action you can take for your economic future, and we think there are obviously other benefits to it in addition to economic, and that the greatest percentage can participate specifically in the research enterprise. In terms of EDI in the last number of years, I think that in our institutions, like society as a whole, there's been a greater recognizance of historic and traditional systemic barriers and attempts to get rid of those or to open the field and the table to more people and make sure that they have a fair shake. I think in the last couple of years, and this is a pretty recent phenomenon that we've been, undertaking this with the level of energy that has been the last couple of years. There have been criticisms of some of the specific measurements and programs that have gone on. I think we're open to those criticisms. I think we're open to making things better inside of our institutions. There are regularly programmatic reviews to look at, and this isn't just for these policies, it's for any policies that are going on across the administration. So I think we are committed to it. And I think in the research enterprise, again, as my colleague said, this is about actually opening up the diversity of viewpoints that are able to come to the table and improve research. And we know in corporate teams, diversity of perspective and viewpoints makes things better and leads to better outcomes.
In 2017, the Liberal government put together a fund called the Canada 150 Research Chairs. Mr. Hanley, your organization understandably welcomed that. One of the new research chairs was Jonathan Pruitt, the chair for biological dystopias, and he received a one-time federal grant of $350,000 for 7 years each. So that's a total of $2.4 million taxpayer dollars. What he did with that money is he wrote a bunch of papers using falsified data. Thanks to Retraction Watch, we know that he had 15 papers retracted over 3 years. So I guess we're pursuing research excellence. How do we prevent this type of fraud from happening going forward? And what are the gaps that might exist to prevent this from happening again?
Sure. It's a great question. And when I started working with U15, we have a committee of vice presidents research, not the specific case, but questions around academic integrity, fraud, and research ethics was right at the center there. I think that nobody has, or no institutions have a greater interest in ensuring that the system is robust and has a minimum amount of that kind of behavior. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the case that you're talking about, so I can't really speak to it specifically. But we are absolutely committed to ensuring that our academics are passing rigor, and that the studies that are being put forward are, world class. And again, it underscores the importance of peer review. It doesn't mean that certain things don't slip through the cracks. You heard about a few famous studies in the United States that had the same thing, and I don't think it's something you can ever entirely eliminate. But we do everything in our power to try to eliminate it. I think our commitment to it will be steadfast. And I will say that that's the case with all of those, regulatory requirements. I mean, we handle hazardous materials in labs. There's a lot of regulation that needs to be overseen by universities. We think we do it in a way that's excellent, but I think the point to underscore is the reputations that are on the line when those things go wrong are our reputations. And we believe they're world class, and we do everything we can to protect them as well.
And we continually hear about this peer review process, but 15 papers, it seems that who's not doing their job if we have 15 papers making it through that peer review process? So we first have the funding granted at the beginning. That's apparently a peer review process, and then you have 15 papers that then are later on retracted. Somewhere along the line, somebody's not saying something, and this is an egregious case in a lot of document or a lot of papers happening. So, how do we manage that? How do, from our perspective, the research community is coming to the Canadian government looking for $5 billion annually. How do we manage that?
So, it is a challenge, and again, I'm not familiar with the case. I don't know what the journals were that were publishing those various articles, whether they're Canadian journals that are not Canadian journals, and the adjudication processes that were there. One thing that has been an issue of focus, again, for the Vice President's research to try to manage these things across their institutions, is the pressure to publish for researchers and the advent of journals that may have easier processes for publishing than others, and what we do to be able to control the proliferation of those journals if they don't have the tight enough requirements. And I'll say the weighting of that against wanting open science and collaboration, and not wanting only Nature and Science and a few prestigious journals to control all of the academic currency. So I think there is a balance there. The case you're talking about is clearly egregious, and I mean, I'll tell you, I'll make a point of looking it up after this committee meeting.